Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm joined by Josh Qualtieri.
Close enough.
Close enough. That's as good as I can manage. And we're going to be talking a bit about ZombieSmith games and this Quar's War. But before we get into that, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. But I was wondering if you want to give people a bit of an idea of who you are and how you got to this point in the hobby, if they haven't come across your work before.
Sure. Well, it's good to be here. Who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. I was in the film business for a while. I worked in animated films. I started a video game company. I ran a video game company for a while. So I've always been doing creative things. And probably around 2001 or 2002, there were no modern zombies on the market. And we really wanted to play some zombie games. And I thought, how hard could it be to make models? It can't be that hard. So we sculpted up some zombies, I hand-built the first spin caster. We learned how to make molds, and 20 years later, here we are.
Breaking down a washing machine then, were you, for the spin caster? That's always a fun favorite.
Yeah, I actually used an old router motor, like a 1.6 horsepower router motor, flipped it over, welded up a plate. This is the point where I can send you pictures. And built a thing. It's the most death trap looking thing ever. I've been sprayed by metal, but it was great fun. And I used that I ran a business off of that thing for 8 or 10 years.
Very cool. So how long have you been interested in miniatures and gaming then, before you got into sculpting your own?
Yeah, so my dad was into Hex and Counter war games, like old Avalon Heller SPI, for folks familiar with those, like Squad Leader, all those. And, of course, he looked at me as a son, but he also looked at me as a future game opponent. So as soon as I could roll dice and move pieces, I was gaming with my dad. And then I was probably 8 or 9 years old. We were in a game store in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was the first time I really saw miniatures, a little pack of 15 millimeter Napoleonics. I have no idea what nationality they were. But I made him buy me those. And then, I played with those alongside my action figures for years. And then as I got older, I just got more and more actually into historical miniatures. When I was a kid, a lot of World War II, like Command Decision. Again, I'm going way back.
Yeah.
And so I was always kind of a mix of a Hex and Counter wargamer and a miniatures painter more than a gamer until I got in my 20s.
That's an interesting way of coming at it. The Hex and Counter, especially the likes of the Avalon Hill range, is massive, and it seems to be not even an age, well, possibly an age thing these days, but certainly a geographic divide where a lot of gamers sort of 40s, 50s, earlier, if they're from the US, then definitely those are big entry points. Yeah. Over here, miniatures were probably, the miniature war games, even historics, were slightly more prevalent than the Hex and Counter sort of games were. But it's interesting that that's the direction you've come from. We'll talk about the Quar and the rules later on, but there's certainly I can see elements of that sort of rifling through some of the rules as well.
Yeah, I've you can see one bookshelf behind me, but all the books over here are military history, dry, boring stuff, but also a couple shelves of Osprey books and all that. So I've always been sort of fascinated with historical gaming.
So the Quar then, or Quar, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
I say Quar.
I always go Quar because of war, and it just rhymes so nicely.
Well, so there, people often ask me, I'll tell you this quick little story, where that name came from. So I started drawing them when I was 8. I've also always been drawing and sculpting, actually. And my mom said, "Oh, you draw those a lot. What are they called?" And I'm 8 years old. And I said, "Hookers." Mom said, "What? They're hookers." And she's like, I think you should probably pick a new name. And for me, there was a TV show on called TJ Hooker that had William Shatner. And I just thought that was the greatest name. So originally the Quar were called Hookers. So I had to come up with something new, and I wasn't super, there you go. I wasn't super creative. So I took QU from my last name, Qualtieri. I took AR from War, and I made Quar. So
Well,
Even though I guess you say war, so I guess it'd be
yeah.
Quar. Anyhow, yes. So that's actually where the name came from.
I like the TJ Hooker reference because whenever you said hookers, and obviously knowing that you segued in from historics, I imagined it would have been an ACW reference then.
Oh, that's a fair point as well. I used to joke and tell people I was named after Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain,
yeah,
famous from Gettysburg, Little Round Top, but that's not true.
So the world that they inhabit, I've had to look through a few of the PDFs that you've done previously, and to say it's rich may be a little bit of an understatement. It could almost do with a primer on language, accents, and topography, because the first 50 or so pages of one of the PDFs is the backstory, how we've got to the point we're at, including regiments of distinction from both the Crofterian and the Crusaders. How long has this been developed? You've been drawing them since you were a kid. Has the story always been there and just expanded, or was this something you had to sit down and physically go, I'm going to design this world?
Yeah, when I was a kid, they were more sci-fi, and I would draw them fighting World War II Germans or space aliens or stormtroopers or whatever that may be. And as I got older, I honed in a little bit on just the sort of the aesthetic and the pathos and the feel I wanted them to have. And it wasn't until the early 2000s that we kind of settled on the World War I aesthetic. Maybe more 1920s, but World War I is what's familiar to people. But the map of their home world hasn't really changed a lot. I mean, there's a whole bunch of detail here. I don't know how deep you want to go of the evolutions they went through. At first I was playing around with them when I was a teenager. They were, anytime you read a fantasy novel, there was, it always takes place in a single continent, right? The map has like one continent. You're like, well, what's the rest of the planet? And so as a teenager drawing them, they were the technological society on the other side of the fantasy planet is sort of how it was in my head. There's an old Ralph Bakshi animated film called Wizards that is a technology versus magic that and the Dark Crystal were super influential on me as a kid. And so I've tried to pull a lot from those and how they made me feel very much a child of the 70s and 80s. I don't know, and then it all started to click, and I left to write, and I don't know, it all just kind of made sense. And I set out with a war with no obvious bad guys. It'd be easy to take sort of any position or see their perspective, and also not to glorify it. They all do just want to be at home, with their families, eating moths and smoking their pipes. And also, I try not to have any heroes. There's no massive heroes like in Warhammer or anything like that. There may be heroes, the equivalent of Medal of Honor winner or something like that, but that is the rarity, not the norm, right? It is not a fantastical world. There's no magic. And once I put myself in that box of sort of those, it kind of flows out of me a little bit.
Yeah, because it's interesting read, not just because of the way it's been constructed and the narrative that's come in there, where you have the long war, 700 years of various sort of internecine little fights overlapping in various places, to the current iteration of this continuous warfare being the crusade in the last sort of decade, but also having the little snippets, the box outs from historians or members of the military, or the letters to and from home. All of those just add so much layer and depth to the world that's being created.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Some of those little vignette stories are my favorite bits to write, or I've got a couple of collaborators over the years. I call them Pete and Repeat, Pete Murray and Pete McKenna, have helped me write a lot of that stuff, and we've had a bunch of sessions where we come up with ideas. To me, even though it's about vehicles and aircraft and bullets, it's really about how they want to live and how they live, and when you watch a World War I movie, 1917, and 500 people die on screen, you couldn't care less. That horse dies, or somebody threatens a dog. All of a sudden, we're like, "Oh my God, what is going on?" And I've found with the Quar, it's the same way. Like one little Quar is in trouble, or one dies, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is tragic." And so I pull in that a little harder than I ought to, but it works, and it keeps it engaging.
Yeah, I mean, just the concept of poor little humanoid-esque anteaters attempting to stave off the enemy, and it doesn't matter what enemy it is, because for all intents and purposes, they're grist to the mill for purely political or those sort of reasons. And it doesn't really matter whether it's on the Royalist side or the Crusader side. It has that interesting concept of not having any baggage that we often have to deal with a lot of especially historical games, and as you get closer to modern time periods, the baggage gets sort of writ wholesale, and people get sort of tarred with a brush for picking a specific nation or faction or whatever it happens to be. But here you've got the concept of that level of technology, that World War One sort of level of tech, but you have carte blanche to draw your own conclusions as to why people are involved, because it's not even clearly delineated within the Royalist side that everybody's the same.
Sure, right. I purposely stayed away from religion as well. There are going to be religions, but I just always say for the most part they worship their ancestors, and they care very much more where your family or my family came from than anything else. And so I get asked that question about the colors of them quite often as well, because there's red, blue, green, purple, all of that. And I just say, it was probably regional at some point, but they've all conquered and reconquered each other so much that they're just everywhere. And they more want to know where your great grandfather grew up than anything else.
Yeah, interesting. Not character. Interesting model concepts with scale, because on ZombieSmith there are currently 3 scales, ranging from 6 mil all the way through to 15 and 28. Presumably you started with 1 and then chose to go in another direction. And I'm going to guess 28 first, was it?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So where did the idea come from to push into smaller scales then?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, my first models were 15 millimeter Napoleonics, and so I've always had a love for 15 millimeter. Like I bought a bunch of Battlefront miniatures, for the World War II stuff and Team and all that. Never played those games, but I own an awful lot of them. And so I started out with skirmish games. Well, first of all, I started out sculpting the Quar with no rule book in mind. And then I was going to shows, and customers would come up and say, "Well, what rule set are these for?" They're like, "Well, whatever you want." And about half of those people would walk away, and the other half would go, "Sweet."
Yeah.
So we set out to write some rules. And in writing those rules and discovering that bit on its own is also a lot of fun, I really wanted to give a try to mass battle type stuff. And back then, all the Quar were metal. And so I have plenty of folks that were buying giant piles of metal Quar and fighting really large battles. But I also wanted to do some of the 15 millimeter stuff to make it easier to do some more epic fights. And also my background in animated films, I was a 3D modeler, texture painter, that sort of thing, matte painter. And then all of a sudden in 2010 or 11, it became possible to take my day job back then, which was 3D modeling, and 3D print vehicles and things to generate masters to cast in resin or whatever. And all of a sudden it was easy to make a 28 millimeter vehicle or a 15 millimeter vehicle or a 6 millimeter vehicle out of the same scale, or out of the same model, to do those different scales. And for me, like, I've never really, I put a lot of work into the books and I love the rules, but I've never been upset or jealous or anything like that about folks using my models and other rule sets, and which is why I give the rule books all the way for free as PDFs. I of course have to charge for the printed versions, but I'll always give. I want people to love the world, and I mean, business side, I'm going to make more money off the models than I am the books.
Sure.
And so there are a lot of people wanting to use Quar and Flames of War. I'm like, cool, yeah, I can do that. So the first infantry 15 millimeter were hand sculpted, and I was terrible at it. But they had their own little character, and the vehicles look great because, again, those were digital models. And then right before COVID, I started sculpting Quar digitally as well, and that's where the current 15s come from, and then the new 28s actually started the other way around there with the 15 millimeter first, and then worked my way up, partnered up with Wargames Atlantic to do the 28s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably a good time to talk about the current 28s and the upcoming release.
Yeah.
It's currently on pre-order at the moment for this Quar's War. And it's an interesting looking set. I see from your own unboxing, actually, there's a few changes coming as far as the rules go. So the PDF that I was having a look through has you just need a deck of cards essentially, and you total up the number of units that are going to be on the table, and everybody gets an initiative card. But there's a new deck in the book that is more sort of like an average dice.
So that's for the original This Quar's War is more of a mass battle game, and so these models are totally playable in there, and that rule set from 12 or 13 years ago is also Crusaders versus Koftirans. So I've come full circle, even though I've done a lot of other factions. For those who want to see the sort of the version 1 of the rule set in the box, it's Rhyfles Pocketbook, which is a shorter book, and it's more of a skirmish system. So it's made for 6 to 12 models per side. And then, this is a version 2 of that where we've made it a little more reactive. So there's a lot of going on each person's turn. And the way the activation system works, and it sounds confusing until you do it, there's a bit of fog of war in the activation system. So there are sets of cards, 10 cards, and they either have a 3, a 4, or a 5. And if it's your turn, I will pull a card and not show you and hide it. And then you'll take activations, and you'll know that you have at least 3, but you don't know if you have 4 or 5. So you've got to plan a little bit and make some decisions. When you get to that third one, you'll ask me if you have a 4th, and I'll either say nope, or I'll say yes, but I don't tell you if you have a 5th. And then you just figure out how far you can push it, because some activations some orders will take multiple activations.
Okay. Yeah.
So they might fail and that sort of thing. So what's in the box is a quick start version of that. It's 48 pages, and it's everything you need to play in the box. And then I'm working on the full rule book. It'll probably be this summer, that adds vehicles and lots more profiles for models. And the models I release between now and then will have PDF and stats that you can download to use them in the quick start rules. Yeah,
because it's even though the new box set contains the multi-part plastics, there's a whole slew of stuff coming down the line that I've seen in various pictures and buckets, either another type of plastic, or you can still be sticking with pewter for some things as well.
Yeah, so it'll be a combination. It is a plastic, but it's not polystyrene. Requires super glue, so it's not a resin. I will be doing some of the smaller bits like extra heads and bayonets that are super small in pewter. And then I put up an image today. This summer I'll be releasing the vehicles both as downloadable STL files, but I'll also 3D print those. Oh, yeah, there you go. You're on top of it. Those are some test prints. So I'll sell those both as 3D prints for those without printers, but I'll also push the STL files so that people can print them on their own. Yeah.
I mean, that looks like it's going to be an awful lot of fun. And the fact that you can sort of scale up then into the mass battle game from the 2-player starter skirmish is also interesting, because there's a lot of command and control, I suppose, in the mass battle game then.
Yes.
Which adds another layer of interest. I always enjoy not knowing exactly where people are going to be going or what's going to be happening. Too often games can be very stagnant if everybody knows exactly how far people can move and how far people can fire.
And I've never been a fan of I go, you go. I want some sort of interactive turn sequence.
Yeah. If people are looking to keep tabs on what's coming up for the releases, then where's the best place to look for it?
Well, I'm terrible at social media.
Good.
But there's so we've got the Quar discussion Facebook group,
yep,
which is where a lot goes on now. There's a ZombieSmith Instagram account. I also there's a ZombieSmith Facebook group as well. But yeah, we're on Discord. I'm on Instagram. I mean, but I think the main hub right now is probably the Facebook page. I know, like, the only reason I have Facebook is for this. I don't really use it other than that, and so I know a lot of people aren't big fans of Facebook. But right now, that's kind of where we are.
It's a good way to keep tabs. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. Obviously, some people are put off by metal. I don't know why. Maybe it's a generational thing. But having the new plastics available will hopefully just showcase this to a lot more people, and understand that even the metal and plastic range that you're working on yourself should be available alongside the box set as well. Then.
Yeah, I think one of the things, when early on talking to Wargames Atlantic about this, is I've done a little bit of distribution, retail, but mostly it's been conventions in the web. And so the first thing we wanted to get out was a new set of rules, something that's 2-player, so somebody could buy it, introduce it to other folks. But also, it's going to be an introductory thing to the universe for an awful lot of people, because there's an awful lot of people, unfortunately for me, that have not encountered the Quar yet. Yeah. And so, one of the other questions I get asked a lot is, are we going to be releasing the plastics separately from the 2-player box? And the answer is yes. I know there's a bunch of people that will buy, 5-10 boxes, Crusaders or Koftirans or whatever that may be. And that is definitely the plan. But we had to start somewhere. And the thing that made the most sense was giving folks a complete product that they can then build off of. So if it does well, then there should, of course, be follow-on products. We've talked about a bunch about what those might be. And then also I've already got a year's worth of monthly releases sculpted up for both sides, with more officers and heavy weapons and cavalry and vehicles and all that. So I plan to support it for quite a while, and I think most likely we're going to have some new plastics as well beyond what's in this box.
Oh, maybe we'll see cavalry in the future. Who knows?
For sure.
I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more pick squirrel messengers, and then I hope all snipers are dealt with immediately for war crimes against pick.
Immediately, yes. Yeah. We're sniping the poor little guys. So just as a preview, this is March. That's probably June. Ooh. Will be squirrel messengers, standard bearers, squirrels, cooks, and some of the command team mobs.
Fantastic stuff. Well, it's been a real pleasure getting a chance to speak with you today, Josh.
Good to see you. Good to meet you.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to know more, please feel free to drop messages below. I'll pass them across and we'll see if we can get you answers. Until next time, take care.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you want to click it. Go on.